Do you get really bad periods and often think you're the only one? Do you struggle with cramps, anxiety, low mood, and sometimes think you're going crazy? We're going to talk about bad periods. And when I say bad, I mean awful, and ADHD. I'm going to cover the link and how you can manage it effectively. Welcome to the What's Eating You podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, and I'm a psychologist, published author, and public speaker, here to educate and validate. Enjoy the show. Now, before we go into this episode, just a trigger warning, it may be a little bit graphic because we are going to talk about the menstrual cycle. So if you don't like hearing about the menstrual cycle, please skip this episode. And if any men are listening, let me know. I would love to know if males listen to this podcast and if this episode in particular was helping you understand the menstruating women in your life. Welcome back to another episode of the What is Eating You podcast. I'm your host and clinical psychologist, Stephanie Giorgio. Wow, it feels good to say clinical psychologist. I just want to say it all the time now. And this is just a reminder, if you've achieved anything big in your life, make sure you celebrate it and you tell the world and you shout it from the rooftops, because you should be so proud about what you are achieving, no matter how big or small it may seem to you. We gather here today in my new house, in my little room. I'm using a different microphone, so I hope the audio is okay. But for me to be consistent with what I do, there are sometimes some accommodations I need to make, and I know that it could affect the quality of the episode, the timings of the episode, but I am doing the best I can given the circumstances. I don't have a fancy studio. I'm still just recording out of the comfort of wherever I am in the world. And at the moment I am in Queensland, Gold Coast. I have booked a little trip to Melbourne for my dad's birthday, and also it just happens to fall on Easter, although we do celebrate Greek Easter, and Greek Easter is really far this year. It's actually in May. Normally Greek Easter falls a week or two behind regular Easter, but I'll be there, and I've also got a charity gala to attend, which I'm really excited about. I haven't been fully out and about in a long time. Anyways, let's get into the episode. So this episode came about from the women I work closely with in my food freedom program. So this is a program designed to help you improve your relationship with food, overcome binge eating, bulimia, body image issues, but it's so much more than that. And every week, the people in this group submit logs to me, so I get a closer look into their personal life, into their eating habits, what they're eating, when they're eating, their thoughts and their feelings around eating. It's called a monitoring record, and this is how I can actually understand your eating problem, because if I don't have data on it, if I don't know what you're thinking, if I don't know what you're feeling, if I don't know when it's happening, then I can't help you. A lot of programs I've seen out there are quite prescriptive, and they'll say, do this, don't do that, do this with intuitive eating, but they don't actually take an individualized, personalized approach to understand your particular eating. But the point of the story is, as I was reading these logs, I noticed all these women had something in common, and it was horrible periods. Now, for me, I've never really struggled badly with my cycle. I think as I get older, it feels like it gets worse, but I think it's because I'm more aware. When you're younger, you're so busy, you go, you're quite active. You're not really in tune with your body. You're not really in tune with your emotions. So I think as you get older, obviously your hormones are changing with age, but also you're just more aware and more, you notice your bodily symptoms, you notice your moods more, and you give more time and space to it. And these women were reporting really heavy bleeding, having to leave work early, not going to work at all, and thinking they were the only ones. So I wanted to share this episode so you may not feel alone if you have particularly bad periods. Now, majority of women in this group, I think everyone except 2 people have ADHD. Now, I'm not saying every woman with ADHD has bad periods, but I've taken a deep dive and looked into this, and there is a link that could explain this, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the link between ADHD and periods, why does it happen, and what can you do about it. So let's start off with periods, essentially. The word period gets thrown around a lot, and if you have ADHD and you menstruate, your cycle can have a big impact on your ADHD symptoms. And one thing I found out is that ADHD medications can also make it more likely that you'll have PMS. Interesting, huh? We'll go through the period and then we'll go through ADHD. So what is your cycle? The menstrual cycle, the time from the first day of your period to the day before your next one. This lasts an average for 28 days for most people. And we can split the cycle into two phases, the follicular phase and the luteal phase. Now, I'm not an expert in the cycles of menstruation and the phases, but I'm going to do my best to try to explain this. During this time, you have fluctuating estrogen and progesterone. And these types of hormones, they change your mood, your energy, and your productivity levels. A good rule of thumb is that high estrogen states equate to better mood, energy, and executive functioning. So we know executive functioning is what happens in your frontal lobe in the brain. It's your memory, your processing speed, your organization, your ability to get started on tasks. And this is where people with ADHD struggle because their executive functioning is impacted by lower levels of access to dopamine and norepinephrine. These are neurotransmitters. People get neurotransmitters and hormones confused. So your neurotransmitters are in the brain. Now, you're generally at your best. So when your high estrogen is high, your functioning is better. Whereas in low estrogen states, mood and an executive functioning worsen, as do ADHD symptoms. So let's talk about the follicular phase. The follicular phase lasts approximately 2 weeks, starting on the first day of your period and ending with ovulation. Now, there are signs of ovulation. You can Google what they are. And then during the rest of the follicular phase, your estrogen levels rise in the first 2 weeks of your menstrual cycle. So we know that estrogen is good, so you feel pretty good in the first 2 weeks of your cycle. You may feel stronger, more motivated, more determined. You're feeling pretty high. And then after ovulation, this is when your estrogen drops and your progesterone levels rise. Both hormones are at their lowest levels in the days right before your period. Now, that may also cause a drop in dopamine. So a lot of people, before they even get their period, they feel their mood drop, and this can be why. And for some women, that can mean a double whammy of worsening ADHD symptoms and PMS. So remember, when progesterone levels are high, dopamine levels drop. So for women with ADHD, the week leading up to menstruation, when you're bleeding, is really an awful time to try to get everything done or anything done. And this is where you probably are more critical. Why can't I get things done? What's wrong with me? Last week, I was on a roll. Why is everything stopped? PMS and ADHD share a volatile relationship. So due to the hormonal fluctuations during the menstrual cycle, you may see your productivity and focus climb when your estrogen is good and then covers the whole of estrogen and you plummet and the PMS kicks in following ovulation. During the week before menstruation, increasing progesterone and declining dopamine can provoke and exacerbate ADHD symptoms such as irritability, forgetfulness, impulsivity, often at the same time, and heighten your emotional dysregulation. So for those who don't know, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. Yes, you are born with it, but there can be people who have a higher genetic vulnerability or genetic loading, and then your environment can make it more apparent that you have ADHD, or if you have really good support in place, you may not notice it. It's marked by persistent inattention, challenges with memory, concentration, focus, hyperactivity, and sometimes impulsivity if you have that subtype. There's 3 types of presentations. It begins in childhood, but for many people doesn't get picked up until adulthood, especially if you are a female. Now, symptoms of ADHD can differ from person to person, but there's those 3 presentations: hyperactive, impulsive, inattentive, and then a combined subtype. Women more often have the primarily inattentive subtype. We also see that sometimes hyperactivity and impulsiveness, it doesn't go away with age, but people can either learn to manage it better or they have outlets to manage their hyperactivity, impulsivity. Maybe they do a sport or they just have better coping strategies. Right, let's talk about ADHD and the hormone connection. We don't know exactly what causes ADHD, but there's a lot of research out there into issues during pregnancy, neurodiversity in the family, lead exposure, etc. But what we do know is that how your body produces certain brain chemicals, our neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine, people with ADHD have lower levels of access to them. They still produce them, but just in different amounts. Now, usually this is treated with stimulant medication. So the stimulant medication increases levels of dopamine, norepinephrine, making it easier for nerve cells in your brain to communicate. And this can help you relieve ADHD symptoms. So a lot of the people I work with who take medication just say that it quietens the noise. They're able to focus on one thing at a time. Hormones. The female sex hormone estrogen also increases the amount of dopamine in your brain. Another female hormone, progesterone, acts on dopamine as well, but the research doesn't fully understand yet what effect it has. We are just in such early stages of this, so we're just going to try and let you know what is known so far. So how does your period affect ADHD? And if you do have ADHD, I want you to reflect on this. Do you have particularly bad periods? Are you okay? Was it worse when you found out you had ADHD? Did you become more aware of it? And if you have bad period symptoms and you don't have ADHD, my strategies at the end are going to help you, so make sure you stick around for that. Now, there's some scientific evidence that stimulants have a greater effect when combined with estrogen. As those levels drop in the days leading up to your period, you may see symptoms get worse. Some women say their ADHD seems worse in the later part of their menstrual cycle. Their symptoms may flare and their medications don't work as well. And one study found that when estrogen levels are low, ADHD symptoms increase, but we don't know why. Now, we know that women and girls and women, menstruating women, have predominantly inattentive ADHD, with issues more related to focus and concentration rather than jumping on the couch and being hyperactive. So what you may notice is you have trouble paying attention, even worse during your period. You can't stick to a task. Your relationships just feel worse during that menstruating phase or leading up to it. So remember, it's when the estrogen is low. Yes, when it's low. Can't control your emotions, you find it harder to get organized and you lose or forget things. And don't forget that depression and anxiety is often more common in ADHD, especially unmanaged ADHD. Now, we need to be careful because some of these symptoms mirror those of PMS, which can come on when estrogen and progesterone levels drop right before your period. So right before your period is the danger zone or the alert zone. And whether or not you have ADHD, many women during this time before their period may experience anxiety, crankiness, low mood, sleep problems, which we're going to go into, and trouble concentrating. Now, before I go into how ADHD affects PMS symptoms, I want to quickly cover PMDD because I get asked a lot about it. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's really interesting because this is a mental health condition in the DSM-5, which is the book we use to diagnose. But when I was Googling it, I'm not sure if it's in America, but they call it a hormonal health condition, which implies that kind of fix your hormones, it will go away. And I'm actually going to get an expert on the show to talk about PMDD because it is becoming a lot more recognized and prevalent. But I guess that it is a bit strange that it's in a mental health condition, but it's because it also has mental symptoms. So it's got depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, but also physical symptoms. So it's a bit of both. Right. So PMDD, it's a condition that causes clinically significant and impairing depression, anxiety, mood swings, and uncomfortable physical symptoms in the week leading up to when you menstruate, the onset of your period. PMDD improve once you start bleeding and are minimal, if not absent, in the weeks following. PMDD disproportionately affects people with autism and ADHD. And we're going to speak a little bit why, but I don't want to make this whole episode about PMDD. Now, how do you know if you have it? It's actually challenging to get diagnosed because you have to track your periods, because we need to prove that it's happening at the same time every time. So to meet the criteria of PMDD, you need at least 5 of the following symptoms, at least 1 from each category. Now, the symptoms must cause distress or interfere with your day-to-day living during most menstrual cycles over the preceding year. So you have to prove it happens at the same time, right before your period. It gets better once you start menstruating. And during that time, this is what can happen: unstable and easily influenced mood, irritability, depressive or hopeless mood, anxiety or tension. That's criteria A. Criteria B, decreased interest in usual activities, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, appetite changes, sleeping difficulties, so either insomnia or hypersomnia, which is oversleeping. And then you also get feelings of overwhelm and physical symptoms such as breast tenderness, joint, muscle pain, sensation of bloating, or weight gain, which is interesting. Now, while PMDD shares symptoms with PMS, and people are like, well, what's the difference? PMDD is less common and more serious. People actually contemplate, they think about suicidal thoughts during this time. It also interferes with your functioning with PMS. You're like, oh, this sucks. Oh, I hate my life, but you still get on with it. With PMDD, it's a lot more debilitating, and for many people requires medication to resolve. People with PMDD are at risk for suicidality and suicide attempts. So it's really important you speak to a professional. If this is you, please make sure you seek professional help. Not a lot of doctors, I assume, not a lot of doctors are aware of this, but some may be. So just make sure you see someone who does have knowledge in this. Now, even people who don't meet the criteria for PMDD may have severe PMS and benefit from similar treatment. Just quickly, we spoke a little bit about how ADHD medication may influence PMS symptoms. Apparently, the medication you take to control your ADHD could also have an effect on your period. The stimulant medication, dextroamphetamine and amphetamine, lists painful menstrual cramps as a possible side effect. So it can be hard to know if it's the PMS or if it's the medication. And then you've got your methylphenidate, which is another stimulant such as Ritalin. And this is really interesting. It may cause heavier menstrual bleeding. So if you're on an ADHD medication, you have a really heavy bleeding, this is worth knowing about. So there has been some studies on this and on fertility, but they were done on animals and not people. So I'm hesitant to report what that said. All right. So now we understand the period, kinda. I just read this and I think, why was this not taught in school? Why weren't we taught about our stages? We taught about the 4 stages of your menstrual cycle and what you can experience. And now there's a whole world out there. There's businesses around cycle syncing workouts and cycle syncing everything. And it's so interesting. And even as I read this, it's so complicated. And then I get anxiety. I'm like, oh, should I be tracking my period? Should I know what phase I'm in? Maybe I should plan for this. So I guess it's just important not to get overwhelmed by this information. It's okay. I think the best thing you can do, now we're going to go into strategies, is just become a little bit aware of your cycle and just become aware of when it's happening, because awareness can precede change. So don't go spending all this money, my ADHD ladies and listeners, don't go spending all this money on all these apps and cycle syncing stuff. It's okay. So what can you actually do to help this, right? So the first thing you want to do is, after you finish menstruating, so after you actually bleed, this is when you're going to start to feel the best. So this is when you want to work on your big projects. You want to cross off things on your to-do list. You want to schedule your appointments and social events during this time, take your workouts up a notch and support your future self. And this is so important. When you feel motivated, when you have energy, go above and beyond. Think, what would future me need? Tomorrow when I'm tired and I wake up, what's going to help me feel better? Maybe it's putting your clothes out. Maybe it's meal prepping. So think of what you can do during this phase after your period to prepare to ride out the more difficult parts of your cycle. There's actually a skill called Cope Ahead. It's a dialectical behavior therapy skill. And all it means is making a plan for ourselves for dealing with a stressful situation when we encounter it in the future. One thing I know that is a drainer, because I always used to do this to myself, was never have sanitary items in my house. Because when I don't have that time of the month, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to look at any sanitary products. I don't want to deal with it. I won't need them. It's fine. And then the time comes and I'm like, oh my God, I need to get stuff. So things like that. Think about when I get that time of the month, what is it that I need that I can have in my house? And maybe it's practical stuff. Maybe it's tampons, sanitary items. Maybe it's snacks, chocolate. Maybe it's some frozen pizzas so food is easy to get. Maybe it's not having super hectic work meetings. Can you schedule all your meetings around that time of the month? So I'm thinking work life, personal life, relationship life. Maybe let partners know during that time of the month, hey babe, it's that time of the month, just I need you to take more cognitive load this month. My memory is a bit fuzzy. Sorry, not this month, this week. If you want to go out for dinner, you choose the place. Try to just structure that week when you're menstruating to do less. And then once you feel better, do a bit more. Right? I didn't go through the luteal phase, but it doesn't really seem it lasts 2 weeks. It starts after ovulation and ends the day before your period. So you've got your follicular, your luteal, and then when you menstruate, I think that's the cycle. It's amazing. Not even I know. So during the luteal phase, estrogen levels plummet after ovulation and rise slightly during the mid-luteal phase before dropping off again leading up to menses. So menses when you're bleeding. Progesterone levels rise in the days after ovulation before falling in the lead up to menstruation. So it sounds like your luteal phase is a little bit of a transition phase. Changing hormone levels in this phase are thought to explain the range of symptoms that appear for many weeks before menstruation, known as PMS. Okay, so apparently, sorry, I got that wrong. The luteal phase, according to women with ADHD, wreaks havoc on ADHD symptoms. But again, it's good to know all this, but I want you to track your own cycle and do this for at least a year. Do this for at least 3 months to actually get accurate data, because your data is more important than what you read on the internet and you're going to be different. Right, now all the science and where to start, what do we do? So number 1, understand what happens in your body. Track your symptoms, track your mood. See how you feel day to day for a few months during your period, the week before your period, after your period, and then you can make adjustments. So I use the acronym PMS to help you think about this. P, plan ahead. So when you're having your worst symptoms, make this your low cognitive load week. Maybe take a mental health day. Maybe don't have all those meetings. Maybe don't make a lot of decisions. Don't schedule social events during this time. Just have it like a lay low period if you need. Or if you do get really lonely, maybe you do need social events. Remember, it's really up to you what you need. Maybe it's more of a stretching week than a heavy gym lifting week. And just be kind to yourself. The most important thing is I can give you all the practical strategies, but we know that thoughts control how you feel. So even if you do all these strategies, but then you're telling yourself, oh, I'm so weak, it's just an excuse, I should be able to attend meetings, I shouldn't be so lazy. It's all pointless. If your mindset doesn't change, if your thoughts were the same thoughts you had last period, last month, you're going to have the same result and outcome. And this is why we teach brain reprogramming in all of my courses online and in Food Freedom. We actually teach you to rewire the way you think, because if you don't rewire the way you think, nothing in your life is going to change. People try to change the food. They try to change what they do. They try to change their actions. But nothing changes because their thoughts behind everything is the same. All right, back to my acronym. M, mood management. Manage your mood. So as mentioned, You're probably going to be a little bit more dysregulated, a bit more on edge, a little bit more antsy. Get your sleep in. It's so important. I was reading one of the logs from the women today, and she's like, I'm so proud I taught myself how to sleep. She needs and does this whole routine, which is amazing. She showers, she gets a book, she has her warm lamps, no noise, earplugs, headphones, eye mask, whatever it is. She literally developed a system to help her sleep. Now remember, your success comes down to your systems. At work, you've got systems, and this is why a lot of people with ADHD thrive in the workplace, because they have systems. But when it comes to their home, when it comes to how they eat, they don't have an eating system. They don't have a food structure system, and this is what I help with. They don't have a laundry system, a washing system, a house cleaning system, and when you don't have systems, things fall apart. So manage your mood with systems. This could be going for a walk, getting your mental health coffee, taking deep breaths, doing some cognitive behavioral therapy, so learning how to rewire your thoughts. Could be going to a psychologist. It could be reading, whatever helps manage your mood. But sleep is so important. If you're not getting at least 7 to 12 hours sleep a night as a woman, and 7 is on the light end, women need more sleep, and more research is saying you need apparently 10 to 12 hours. So when I sleep in, I don't feel bad about it anymore. I'm like, no, women need more sleep than men. And I just take it. And the PMS, the S was actually for sleep. You need a sleep routine. If you are not getting 8 hours of sleep a night consistently, I want you to stop what you're doing and start here. Why? Why aren't you getting enough sleep? Are you scrolling? Are you up late? That needs to change. You can look up sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is something we do to try to improve our sleep. Things such as not working right before bed because that stimulates your brain. Not watching stimulating TV shows before bed. That stimulates your brain. Not going on TikTok right before bed. That stimulates your brain. And trust me, I'm not perfect. I have done all these things in the past. But it's about negotiating with yourself. At least start 1 day a week, then 2 days a week, and you're going to feel the benefits and you're going to want to keep doing it. Remember, the feeling is going to lead to positive reinforcement and you're going to want to repeat the behavior over and over again. In summary, it is normal to feel some PMS symptoms. Really, really bad symptoms are common, but they're not essentially quote unquote normal. And there's things you can do to help. How do you help these bad symptoms? Prepare for it. If you think you have PMDD, see a doctor, but usually that is managed by preparation. It's managed by acknowledge it in the moment. Okay, I'm having thoughts that I want to be here because that's the PMDD. That's not me. It's about calling it out for what it is. Oh my God, I'm feeling so fat and disgusting and low. That's not me. That's the PMS. And then proceeding mindfully to focus on things that are good in your life and that aren't going to take away your focus and attention from what's important to you. Remember, it's a phase. I know it's a phase that sucks, but don't spend too much time ruminating on a phase because then you're going to feel super bad. Use it as a time to learn about yourself, to recharge your batteries, and to just enjoy some downtime. Women back in the day didn't have to go the way we have to now. So it is a lot. And you're doing amazing. You're doing enough. As a thank you, I would love to invite you. If I want to thank you, and I want to thank the 58 people who've left a rating. This podcast has been downloaded more than 30,000 times, right? So please leave a rating if you haven't. And if you listen to this and you're like, yeah. No, please do. It makes a difference. It helps the podcast get more reach. It helps us get into more ears and we can make a bigger impact together. So right now, I just want you to scroll down while you're on the phone to me and just hit the stars on Spotify or scroll down to the bottom of Apple and just hit a quick review. You don't even have to leave a review. Just leave a rating. I'll be forever grateful. Okay, in the next episode, I'm going to answer your Psychology Sunday questions. I've got some good ones this week, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for being here and have the best day. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I am truly grateful for you being here. If you got something out of today's show, please take a moment to leave a rating or review. To access more resources or support, check out the show notes below. See you next time.